Welcome to the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Danny Kennedy, and I'm here to help you become the very best version of yourself. What is up, guys? Welcome back to this week's episode of the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast. And I am absolutely pumped for today's conversation. We're very fortunate to have Hugh van Cuylenburg back on the podcast the second time. First time round, it was a COVID episode, so it was via Zoom. But I'm absolutely pumped to have him back on today. So, Hugh, welcome to the show, mate.
Thank you, Danny. I do foresee a couple of issues with this episode. The main one being, I know you'll probably want to talk about like my stuff, like wellbeing stuff, and maybe the book that I really want to talk about.
That's right. You did write a book, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah, I heard about it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I just want to talk about fitness stuff. So I don't know how it's going to go. Like it was
just a reverse psychology. You tell me you come in for a chat, but it's just a free consult, is it?
Pretty much. No, I'm so like, I don't know. In fact, it is quite related though to like both our topics because I feel there's so many people come up to me and will say like, oh, a friend of mine's struggling with this, or maybe I'm struggling with this. What do I do with anxiety, depression, whatever it is? And I'm not a psychologist, not a psychiatrist, but I do feel like I could solve most people's problems with a pair of runners and just say, take these away and wear them out. Or
so true.
Or I just feel like so many people I talk to who have really struggled, the key part of their recovery has been, I don't know, they've got into triathlons, or they've really got into the gym, or they've got into cycling, or they've like exercise.
Even on a smaller scale, like you think about having a shit day. You go and do the workout, which you badly don't want to do. And regardless of how good of a workout is, you leave there feeling 10 times better.
It is, yeah. Like we were saying this before we started, but like for me now, at the moment, I'm doing watt bike training. I don't know if you've done much on the watt bikes, but like I'm on those at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
And when my alarm went off this morning, I was like, I can't do this. I hate, why am I doing this to myself? But I always have like a pre-commitment, like the bike's out and ready, all my clothes are ready to go. Banana there, water there. So it's all set up. So I just have to stumble down. My thing's like, just get downstairs, and then you're on. And it just, every day, if I've exercised in the morning, my day is so much better for the rest of the day. Like I just feel amazing afterwards. So
yeah, it's incredible. I was actually talking about this with a friend recently in regards to even tracking my macronutrients with my nutrition. And then obviously in turn, like the training is usually kind of paired with that as well. But when I do those two things well, or put some focus on those two, everything else in my life improves. Like my sleep, work, the motivation to get podcasts done, like everything, hydration, even just like relationships with friends. You're just so much more of a positive person, I think, when you have that momentum across all areas. Yeah,
like a little bit of focus on something. Like my thing's athletics. I love track and sprinting is my thing. And I'm not unbelievably good at it.
Yeah.
And in fact, I have to compete against.
I'm not sure about that.
Well, I have to compete against. I never feel like I'm good because I compete against 20, 21-year-olds, and I'm 41.
Yeah.
That's sort of where and I like my race. The last race I did, I lost. I came eighth comfortably. But I just felt after, I was like, I'm just so proud that I did that. And I've done something so hard. So when something else pops up later in the day that's hard, you don't actually say, well, I did that so I can do this. But I think there's something subconsciously where you go, I've done that. Like, I'll knock this over as well. I've done something really tough this morning, and I'll knock this over as well.
I agree. I can't remember whether we spoke about this in our last conversation on the podcast, but the cold shower in the morning. I reckon we did actually, or we at least talked about it afterwards. I remember you were telling me about it, but that for me is that's the thing that gets me through all the hard shit throughout the day. So like I'll get up first thing in the morning, and 99% of the time, the last thing I want to do is get in a cold shower. But I'll do it because I said I wanted to do it. I said I was going to do it. And then just the power of that cold shower, as soon as I get out of bed, the rest of the day seems like a breeze. Like all of a sudden the to-do list or the big scary task that needs to get done, the momentum you carry from something as simple as having a cold shower is incredible, because it's something you said you're going to do, you didn't want to do it, and you did it anyway. So you just carry that momentum, and it goes across the board for the whole day.
Do you make involuntary noises when you're having a cold shower?
Like, it depends who's up. Yeah.
Oh, okay. because I did it for a while. I did it last summer, and I could do it in this weather at the moment. But when it gets to winter, I'm no chance. But
no good.
The noises that I honestly like.
What gets me is where were we?
It hurts.
I went back to Horsham for Christmas.
Yeah,
and turns out their water's colder there. I reckon it's a bit colder than what it is in the shower here because I got pretty comfortable. I was getting to the point where it wasn't too bad, and the water was fucking freezing there. But I don't know. It's just that thing. Like we were saying before, it's just getting the non-negotiables. I talk about them quite a lot. I was on the podcast yesterday with the girls from Keep It Clean, and we were talking about this. Like, if you can just build up that, doesn't have to be big, but just a small list of non-negotiables that you do every day. The small, minute tasks that you probably don't really want to do, but you get to the point where it just becomes automatic. It becomes a habit. It's just crazy the flow-on effect that can have on other areas of your life, particularly your mental health, I think.
Totally. I mean, I've even noticed a difference between training, because a lot of my running I do after work.
Yep.
Because I've got 2 young kids who can wake up around 5 in the morning sometimes. And so you can't plan and go, well, I'll train at 3:30 just to make sure. I can't anyway. There's no way I can do that. So, but they've started to sleep in till 7, both of them. And in my head, I'm like, well, I could start at 6 and get like an hour in. I feel a lot different training in the morning than I do at night. So I train at night. I find it hard to sleep afterwards. I'm like in such a good mood. I feel excited and happy.
Endorphins,
Yeah. And so, but instead you have it in the morning. I mean, you know all about this, but anyway, I'm probably labouring the point here, but come back to my original point is I would love to talk about exercise with you today. And you probably talk about wellbeing stuff, but
done a good job of it so far.
Yeah, great. Really hijacked.
Mate, since we spoke last, obviously, we'll touch on a number of things today, but obviously since we spoke last, the COVID situation has continued to drag on and on and on and on and on. And the content that you've been putting out with the podcast and through the business and whatnot, no doubt has helped so many people. But obviously recently the new book that come out, Let Go, which is one of the things I did want to talk about on today's show, which if you don't mind I'll bring up at some point.
Okay, if you have to.
I read that as soon as I got that book. I read it in a day, and I'll tell you this: I listen to audiobooks because I fucking hate reading, and I usually, like, no matter how interested I am in a book, I fall asleep within about 20 minutes. Like, could be first thing in the morning, end of the day, middle of the day.
I'm the same.
Sitting there reading a book, I don't know what it does, but it just knocks me out.
Yeah.
But I got through yours in a day.
Wow.
And very similar to the Resilience Project, which I just absolutely loved, along with every single other person who's read it. So how was what I was actually thinking about while I was reading it is, obviously we'll touch on some of the topic in the book at some point, but throughout COVID, was it hard to write the book when everything else in life was so kind of thrown off and whatnot? Was it hard for you to actually write the content and put enough kind of mental bandwidth towards it to give your best content in the book?
I don't know how it happened last year. It was like a blur, and the amount of times I said to myself, this is a terrible idea writing this now. Like, because in my head, in 2019, Penguin were like, we'd love you to do another book. And I said, I've got nothing. Like, I've told you every story I've got.
Tapped out.
There's none left. So thank you for the interest, but I've got nothing left. And then when COVID happened, I started seeing a psychologist because I found myself battling for I was 40 when COVID first happened. I remember thinking, I don't think I've ever struggled like this before. I feel really shit. Like, I feel genuinely unhappy and flat. And then I started to get anxious about that because I'm going, hang on a minute. Every day I'm doing an interview on the radio, on the TV, saying, this is how you cope, this is how you cope. Yeah. And I'd hang up the phone and go, you are so full of shit. Like, you're not coping. Why are you telling people how to cope? And then when I spoke to my psychologist about it, we started working through it all. And I think I first admitted it. It was Dave Hughes on his breakfast radio show.
Okay, yep.
It was 7 in the morning. No, sorry, it was a 6:30 in the morning interview, and I'd had 2.5 hours sleep, so kids weren't sleeping. It was winter in Melbourne. It was just gross.
Yeah.
And
in a great headspace then.
Yeah, I was just so flat. And then, but I did the whole thing. This is how you cope. This is how you cope. Blah blah blah. And then he said, "Hey, how are you going?" Because his family was in Sydney. Were in Melbourne. He was in Sydney, so he had a bit of empathy for people in Melbourne. And I said, I'm totally and utterly broken. And then I covered my mouth. I was like, oh my God, what have I just said?
Yeah.
I don't know how many people listen. It's probably a few. But the second I said that, I felt so much better. And then through that, I started seeing a psychologist who started telling me all this stuff that I wouldn't have discovered if it wasn't for COVID. And I just, every session we had, I felt like she was going, you need to let go. You need to let go of that. You need to let go of that. And that's when the title came from. But I remember thinking to myself, if I ever write another book, I'm going to like find like a really nice beach house somewhere and just like, the movie Love Actually, where one of the characters writes a book from the river, and it's like he's got like a maid like bringing him all his food and everything. And I was like, I'm going to go to a beach house, I'm going to write, and it's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
It was the process last year was the opposite of going to a beach house. I was in my house in Melbourne, and when the kids went to bed, that's when I could start writing.
Right.
When I'd cleaned up the house, and it was like 10 o'clock at night, and I'd write till 1, and then I'd like go to bed and think I'll wake up before the kids write for a bit, but they'd be up at 5. And so it was I hated it. It was just awful. Like it was just, but then part of me was like, well, that's kind of what this book's about, like how hard life can be, and that we just kind of, like life's always messy, and it's just what we do in the mess, when we're in the mess that really counts. And so it kind of worked, because a couple of chapters I wrote, I was so flat when I was writing them, but it kind of helped because I was able to put all my authentic kind of self into it, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know if you listen or watch much content by Robin Sharma, or if you've read any of his books.
You see the 5 a.m. Club?
Yes.
Yeah, I've read that book.
If you haven't read The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, I would highly recommend it. It's that was an absolute game changer for me. One of the first books I really actually read and was interested in, and that's kind of what set me down the path of all the personal development stuff and whatnot. But he has this really good saying, and I'm sure I'll fuck it up, but it's something along the lines of like, change or something that you're doing that's difficult is always hard at the start, messy in the middle, and then beautiful at the end. So I think, that process of writing the book and what you've just touched on now, it makes so much sense. Like the fact that you were feeling that way while writing it probably helped get the message out there even more powerful than what it would have been if you had felt great. Well, if you had wrote it, say 12 months down the track after you kind of got your mental space back on track and you'd been seeing a psychologist for a long period of time, you felt like you're in a much better space. Maybe it wouldn't have been as
really
good
true.
of a message.
I think it's so true what you just said. It's a beautiful quote, because I remember when it was such a blur, but it came out and the book was out, and I hadn't really felt excited. I remember thinking, maybe it's because it's my second book, I don't feel excited about it, but it's there you go, everyone. And it was my first trip.
I remember thinking that. I saw a post on social media or something, and I knew I'd spoken to you before, and you'd said it was coming out.
Yeah.
I was looking everywhere. I was looking on your page, and I was going, have I got the date wrong, or what's going on? There hasn't been. You haven't said much about it.
I didn't even really post about it. I just kind of. Well, it's a weird thing I'm going through with Instagram at the moment as well. I'm having a weird relationship, not knowing what I should be posting, what I shouldn't at the moment. But anyway, I remember. It was rough. The whole thing was rough. It was messy. We got it done. There was a couple of issues along the way with a bit of the editing we did, and I wasn't happy with a few chapters and disagreed, which always happens, but with the publishers on a couple of things. And anyway, it was, but I'm not having out my publisher. Penguin Random House has been amazing to me. But, and then the book came out and it was done, and I'm like, yep, good, that's done. I sort of near the end of the year, and I was in Sydney, and I was walking past the airport, and I saw it up on the stands in the bookshop at the airport, and I got really emotional out of nowhere, and it really hit me. It was a beautiful thing. I was like, this feels, oh my gosh, it's out there. Yeah. It's really good.
That's amazing.
And I saw a guy pick it up, and then he read at the back, and he just put it back down and walked off pretty quickly. But apart from that, the whole thing was I was going to go, mate, what's your problem? But yeah, I remember that's what you're talking about there. It felt really, it was really beautiful to see it there.
Before I go on to the next thing I want to bring up from something you said before, going back to the social media stuff, what do you mean by that? I think I know what you mean.
It's just like I'm really struggling with, it's an incredible marketing tool, but I worry that I don't want to come across like I'm showing off ever.
Here's I know exactly what you mean. Because
that must be hard for you. That must be extremely hard for you.
It's kind of it's weird. My whole perception of it's changed a lot as well. From both aspects, from gym stuff, obviously, I put in the work to try and look a certain way or perform a certain way. So it's me just sharing my stuff. But at the same time, I'm very conscious of I don't want my feed just to be filled with topless photos and all this shit, because it's not valuable to anyone really. Yeah. But then on the other hand as well, I'm like anyone else, I like nice stuff or whatever, but I don't really care about, I don't care about material stuff or designer stuff. But I'm fortunate enough to have some stuff that is like that.
Yeah.
So I'm always a little bit cautious of that as well, like not making it look like I'm posting stuff for the sake of showing that I've got certain things. But what I wanted to talk about is, and I obviously didn't make this up, but this is like the approach that I follow with it now, and this is what I've said to a few people lately, is just documenting what I'm doing with absolutely zero care of like how produced it is, like what the reception is, how many likes, how many views, blah, 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 but just documenting my journey and the things that I probably wouldn't put any thought to, but for most people it might be something that they are super intrigued about, or particularly in the gym, for example, like on my Instagram stories, for example. Usually they're just filled with small snippets of clients doing certain exercises, and I'll put a little caption with cues that I'm telling them to think about. So for me, it's nothing, and it doesn't really I've put it up literally like in the 10 seconds I've taken a video, I've posted a caption and just put it up and put my phone away. So it's really no thought to it. It's not edited and all that type of shit.
It's helpful.
But it's helpful, right? Even, and I'm not sure whether you did any of this, but even like, say, for example, when you were writing the book, and I don't know if you've got any intention of writing a third one, but something like that, it's just documenting the process, or, the moment where you feel like absolute shit, just getting the camera out and chucking on your stories like, I'm writing this book, fucking last thing I want to do right now, feel completely stuck, and then that's it. I just find that type of content is just so relatable and helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I try and do similar stuff with training, and we spoke about this on this podcast yesterday about how, like similar to how you spoke about before on the radio show, how you were giving people this advice, but you didn't actually feel the stuff that you were telling people that they should feel type of thing. I'm the same. Like, I mean, I said on this show yesterday that motivation for training and nutrition and stuff will come and go regardless of who you are.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very similar to anyone. I'm consistent with what I do, but nutrition, for example, like I cannot remember the last time I've had a perfect day of nutrition or perfectly hit my calories and my protein intake or whatever. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So I almost go out of my way to show that.
To share that.
You know what I mean? Like, or if I'm out for a drink, in the past, this is an example, in the past, and not that I have a big following on social media, but in the past, if I was out for a drink or whatever, I would... Yeah, it's big in comparison to some people, but like in the past, I would, if I was out for a drink or if I was partying with friends or whatever, I would purposely never put any of that content on my social media because I was like, I'm the fitness guy. Like people, it's kind of like making me look like a bit of a fraud here.
Yeah.
But now it's the opposite. I'm like, I know, and I say to my clients, if you love a glass of wine with dinner each night or every Friday night you like to have a few glasses of wine, I'm never going to tell you to cut it out because it's something you really enjoy. And you're going to go back to it even worse if I tell you to cut it out completely. So I try and lead by example and just show everyone the shit that I'm doing without trying to produce content. Like I don't try and make posts. It's more so document what I'm doing and turn that into a post, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I reckon for you that'll just be a game changer, even with the podcast and the...
with the podcast, we're about to create a social media channel which someone will do for us, but... For me personally, I feel like I spend too much time, like I'll post something and then see what people, who likes it and what the comments are, and then and I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, is it for validation? Like, am I doing this for validation, or is this helping anyone, this content? I don't know. And so, it's just I haven't been on it Instagram for about a month, and I have to say I've really, really enjoyed the month. It's been great.
Yeah.
And no doubt when the year fires up and we're about to put tickets on sale for the shows for this year, I'll go back on to post that. It's just trying to work out, like, am I sharing family stuff? Am I sharing work stuff?
Yeah, that'd be a difficult one, yeah.
So I don't know. Social media is an incredible marketing tool for me. I mean, that's the reason I asked you.
I reckon post even more. Yeah. Just post even more to the point where it becomes like anything else.
Don't even think about it.
You go to the gym once a week and you spend all week thinking about the one day that you have to go to the gym. But if you go to the gym 5-6 times a week, it becomes just habit and you don't put any thought to it. I reckon if you're just posting more content without any thought about how produced it is or what the response is, it gets to the point where it just becomes super easy.
Yeah.
Because I used to be quite similar in terms of putting way too much thought to what was on there. I would delete something if it didn't get a good response and stuff like that. But
you're looking at it going, no, not enough likes on there.
If I can take that one down, hopefully no one's sorry. In terms of communication, that's something that I think you're awesome at in terms of your writing style. I often kind of think of it as a similar style to someone like a Mark Manson or something like that,
yes.
where
that's cool.
it feels like we're having a conversation like this, and it's so relatable. It's not to the point where you're kind of just reading it like you're reading like an essay or something. It's just really easy to understand. Is that something that you reckon you've always, obviously you speak on stage and whatnot, but is that something you feel like you've always been quite good at?
Well, the experience, I mean, I feel like I learnt this skill out of necessity because we might have said this last time, but when my sister was really sick when she was 14 and I was 17, all of a sudden, so my sister's mental illness, anorexia nervosa, all of a sudden we had such a happy family, and then I felt like we weren't happy anymore because of my sister's mental illness. And at dinner time, that's when it was, we were all watching and not eating, and then there'd be an argument that would start about food after about 5 to 10 minutes. And after a while, I kind of felt like I could tell really funny stories about my day, and I'd get in first before the tears. Like I could tell funny stories, and I kind of learnt that the power of storytelling. I could help. Like it's really hard when you see your parents as a kid as happy people, and then all of a sudden they're not, and it really hurts. And I hated it. And I didn't hate my sister, but I was angry at my sister for that. And I thought, well, I'm the oldest. It's my job to help mum and dad be happy here. And I just started to tell these stories. We used to watch videos of like comedians, and Billy Connolly was mum and dad's favourite. I would watch him, but I'd also watch mum and dad just smiling and laughing. And I'm like, half an hour ago you're in tears. Like, this is so powerful. And so that is where I sort of learnt the power of storytelling, I guess, to really shift people's emotion. But then very similar to you, growing up in a sporting club, like it was a football, I played basketball and cricket growing up a lot, and a bit of football. And when you go to a sporting club, storytelling is like your currency. Like that's, I don't know if it is anymore because now phones are kind of like people's attention for a story isn't as long as it used to be.
Yeah.
But I remember standing around, like during cricket when you're batting, as in when two guys are out batting, you're sitting on the side of the ground. Everyone's just telling stories. Or you go to the pub afterwards, it's standing around with a pint telling stories.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like your currency was storytelling. And my favourite thing to do, I don't get to do it much anymore, but going to the pub and standing around with a group of people and just pint in hand or whatever you're drinking and just talking shit, telling stories.
Shit, yeah.
And I feel like when people come to see me speak or they read the book, I want them to feel like we've just been at the pub talking or at a cafe drinking a coffee, wherever you hang out. But that's kind of the feel that I would like people to have. Certainly when I'm doing up on stage, I know I can do that. And I hope that's what people feel. But when I wrote the book, I really wanted it to be, I felt like, it sounds a bit wanky, but I sort of felt like the second book I was trying to like write an album. It was like, what are 15 really great stories? And we wrote up about 20 of them. I had about 20 to go. And then I sort of, with Penguin, we said, here are the best 15, I reckon, and what order are these stories go in and what are we trying to get to here? But every single one is like, they're just stories. Human beings love stories. I get sent a lot of books now because of the podcast, and you're probably the same with people who want to, which is great. And I got sent 2 last night, and one of the books I got about, I read the first chapter and I didn't pay attention because it was, here are the statistics on this, here's the stats on this, here's what the research says on this. And the second book, it was just a story, the person's life story to start it off, similar themes. I was so into the second book and not into the first one because we remember stories as human beings. We don't, when I'm doing my talks, when I'm on stage, when I'm telling a story, everyone's listening. When I start saying, here are the benefits of this, here's the benefits of this, here's the stat, people start writing stuff down because they'll forget that.
Yeah.
So the more, we just love stories. We just love stories. And that's kind of, I guess that goes back to my sister.
I'll tell you what I reckon would be cool. I mean, this is the last thing I'll say about the social media stuff, but I'll tell you what I think would be cool is something like that, jumping on like a live once or twice, 2-3 times a week, just going for a walk or something and just telling a story.
Yeah.
Just something happened that week or something that, may not have been in one of the books or something along those lines.
Yeah. Well, that's another one. It's called Instagram stories because they know how, no one knows better how the mind works than the people at Instagram, and we love stories. But I think the issue with Instagram stories being, the 10, 20 second, 30. So when I started playing at my cricket club, I don't play there anymore. It was Melbourne Uni. And when I started, you would sit around the pub and tell a story that could last 5 or 10 minutes and everyone's in and they love it. And so everyone's like, my last training session, I went to the pub afterwards and one of the guys said to me, one of the older players came back. So I'd been there for way too long. I think 18, 19 years I think I played at the club for.
Yeah.
And one of the older blokes said to me, what's your favourite memory from the club, and I was about to launch into a story, and there's heaps of young blokes, like 18, 19 around the table, and I was like, I can't tell it. They won't listen. I'll get a minute and I'll check their phone.
Yeah.
I started and I could see them all like going, fuck, this story's going forever.
Yeah,
I was a minute in.
Yeah.
And so I feel like our ability to just be patient and listen to stories is certainly diminishing. That's
diminishing,
for sure.
Yeah. Just going back to the book writing process, for the listeners and for myself, are you able to kind of run us through like how lengthy the process is? And obviously you were doing it kind of after hours at night, but like how much time were you putting in like per session, and in total, like how long do you think it really took you to write your part? Not including like all the editing stuff at the end, but the actual kind of core writing of it.
Yeah. It's a great question. The first book was really fast, like because I'd told the stories 1,000 times before on stage. But this book, I hadn't really told the stories before. So I started in February. Yeah. First week of February started, and it came out in December, 1st of December. 30th of November, sorry. But this one here, it is such a blur. It's so hard to answer that question. But I wrote down, I remember I've got like a little journal book, and I wrote down, I had a weekend where I just wrote down titles of different stories I could think of that I thought were really interesting to people. And then I just told them to myself as if I was going to tell them on stage, because none of them I'd told on stage before. Oh, the Hamish Blake story I had told on stage, but the rest of them I hadn't told on stage. And so I actually... back then we weren't in lockdown, so I was down at a beach house in Fairhaven, so I managed to kick it off the way I wanted to do it, but that was short-lived. But I stood up in the lounge room. I was in a house by myself, and I started telling the stories. I was like, just tell the story as if people were listening. Don't write it, tell it. And I recorded that, and then I listened to it on the way back to Melbourne. I listened to those stories. I was like, how do I want to change those? And then I there's a guy called Craig who helped me with the book from Penguin. Kind of like he called himself like a project manager, and I told the story to him, and he recorded it, and then he got someone to type it all out,
transcribe it type thing.
Thank you, transcribe. That's what I couldn't think of. And then he sent it back to me transcribed, and then I would look at it and go, okay. So, and this is not really answering the question of how long it took, but I do remember.
Oh, I love it's the process. It's interesting.
Yeah. So then I looked at it, and then I said to him, "So here are 20 stories." All up, this is too big as a book. I don't want it to be this big. We then chose our favourite 15, and he just said to me, and he's a riffing bloke, and we get on so well, we're very similar, and I just said, like, what do you like, and which ones do? And he said, here are my favourite 15. I love these. And then we went, okay, we'll literally finesse these. And so I went away and then tried to change them from a story I'd tell on a stage into how I'd write them, how they'd be written. And some of them, a lot of it, there weren't big changes to be made.
Yeah.
And then I'd send it to him to polish it up, to go, this is the grammar needs to be probably this way, or it needs to look this way. And so he'd make changes. Then he'd send it back to me again, and we'd go back and forth like that. Mm-hmm. The whole time there was a publisher involved who would send her chapters, Sophie, who's just amazing, and then she'd look at it and say, I'd take this bit out of here. There was a story I wrote about a woman who came and spoke to me after one of my talks who had cancer. And
I remember that.
And she got me to sign the books for her kids to say how much she loves them, because she didn't have much longer left to live. And, and it was a really emotional part. And I had it in chapter 4, for example. Okay. And Sophie looked at it and she said, Hugh, this is such a beautiful story. Don't let people maybe miss this because they get bored after 2 chapters. We're going to lead with this. And I'm all for going with your most powerful story, but I was like, I think it's a bit too much. And she said, no, it's going up front. And so it went into the introduction and stuff like that happened. Yeah. So that's Sophie's job to look at it from a step back. But I remember, to answer your question of how long a chapter might take, I remember in July, it was very cold, very miserable. Our the Resilience Project office it's more like a warehouse, really.
Okay.
And I had to get 3 chapters done. With the contract, I needed to get, I think it was 7 chapters had to be completed by end of July or something.
Right.
And I had 3 to go that I wasn't. And so I went in on a Thursday morning, and I pretty much didn't come out of there till Sunday, I reckon. Like it was Uber Eats. It was like in this dark room. Like, I don't know if you've seen the movie Beautiful Minds with Russell Crowe with that whiteboard, just like scribbling. Like I had the whiteboard covered, and it was like, it just went into this weird place for 4 days and came out of it with, 3 chapters. And I remember thinking, this could be a pile of shit. Like, I haven't even stepped out of this room. But it certainly was enough to sort of, it actually was quite good, and we didn't change it too much. But Yeah, it's basically, to me, what I've learned over the last, it's like you get an idea or a story and you're just like, how do I make this something that people will find entertaining and helpful? And yeah, that's pretty much it. And it can take a very long time. Other chapters can happen really quickly. The Hamish Blake chapter took half a day to write.
Yeah. People often talk about like flow state.
Yeah.
Right. So what do you find is your, like, how do you get into flow state, or what's like your ideal environment? Like for me, for example, like I'm a bit of a weirdo. Like I'll like sitting like in a relatively darkish place, typically with either like one light or like a blue light type setting, a screen, and then a bit of music, whatever, and I'm good to go.
Really?
Usually early or late, early in the morning or late at night. That's just, I don't know what it is. I just seem to be able to get into that state. Is there a specific environment or little thing that you like to do to get yourself in that state?
Well, before I answer that, what are you doing when you're like, is there an activity you're doing? You're just listening to music, or are you just like
it could
working?
Be, replying to client check-ins. It could be recording a podcast, or
so it's work,
or
like
writing content. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So flow state, for those who are new to flow state, and I think it's in the chapter that I wrote near the end called It's on running. I talk about flow state. So flow state is the activity, and everyone's got it. We've all got it. It's the activity that when you're doing it, time is just it's just irrelevant. You lose track of time completely. If someone stopped you during your flow activity and said, "How long have you been doing this for?" your answer would be, "I actually have no idea."
Yep.
There's research done with conductors over in the US, and they'd stop them, and they would say, "How long have you been conducting this piece of music for?" And they would say, "Oh, I think like 15 minutes," and it was like an hour and 20 minutes or something.
Yeah.
Like you lose yourself completely. Time is no longer a thing. And it's when you're doing that activity, if someone said, "What are you thinking about?" your answer is, "I'm actually not even thinking. This is just happening. Like I'm just doing this." It's often a task that is challenging, but not too challenging for you because you do have a natural talent in that area. So if it's writing content, and a lot of it would be working on fitness stuff, I guess. That's your thing. And so when you get in that headspace, and some people say it's the deepest form of meditation you can have. And the reason for that is your prefrontal cortex. I don't get this wrong because I wrote about it, but it stops. It sort of shuts down, and that's where judgment and critical self-talk and self-doubt creep in.
You lose that track of time and space.
Yeah, totally. So that all goes, but then you also don't have self-doubt because the part of your brain that issues your self-doubt of like, am I good enough to do this? I shouldn't be doing this. Is this okay? It gets arrested. It just stops. It's gone because that part of the brain's not being used. And that's a really lovely feeling. And so for me, for many years it was playing cricket, and then I had to stop playing cricket. And then I noticed it when I stopped playing cricket. I was like, I don't have a thing that gets me into flow, and I miss it so much. And then when I started doing these bigger shows where I'd go and speak in public, I reckon once every 5 or 6 shows I do, I get it. And I know this is make me sound really weird, but I actually feel like, and often it's the opposite. I'm like working so hard up there and I just can't get into flow. But when I do, the last time it happened was in a venue at Adelaide Entertainment Centre, and this is what it feels like to me. And basketballers will say it's like going basketball say he was unconscious. Is that basketballers who say that when they're talking about flow or in the zone or unconscious in the zone? Jazz musicians call it in the pocket. I don't know why they call it being in the pocket. For me, when I'm speaking, it doesn't happen all the time, so I'm not like a genius like this, but occasionally I feel like I'll be 5 minutes in, I'll go, this voice kind of goes, "Oh, you got this." And it's almost like I walk off the side of stage and I feel like I'm watching myself. Like people say out of body, looking down on yourself. That's what it feels like sometimes, awesome. But not often, but it's the best feeling in the world because I'm doing something really hard. I don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
But mainly for me, it's running. Yep. Like now when I do training for 400s, training takes 2 hours, and about 15 minutes into the warm-up, I sort of feel myself kind of like, just like going, this is just great. I'm not thinking, it's just happening. And people will know that. Like if it's a lot of people say for exercise, running, like first 10 minutes you might be like thinking about worries from the day, concerns you got, niggles and then the next 10 minutes, this is for people who go longer distance, next 10 minutes, you just like 15 minutes, like, oh, this feels really good. And in the last 15 minutes, all of a sudden you're having these like amazing thoughts, like you're problem solving without even your mind's you're just solving all these problems in your life, and you feel good about everything. And that's kind of so for me, it's it's about identifying what you're really good at. But I'm not a very good runner, but to me, I just love it so much.
Yeah.
So but that's flow, and it's a really important part of life. The older we get, the less likely we are to do it because we're so busy and we go, I don't have time to, it's, I don't know, play golf or garden. Like I don't have time. I'm too busy. The kids have got to get here. But we got to make time for it.
Obviously, in the book, the big part of the book is around vulnerability.
Yeah,
it's a very hard word to say. I find it's very hard to say. It's basically just mumble the whole fucking thing. But
no, I understand
vulnerability.
My difficult word to say is privilege. I always butcher privilege. So, privilege.
My girlfriend can't say Rory. She says Rowie.
Rory. Can't say Rory.
Rory.
I feel like that's a pretty easy one.
I'm like, who's that?
Rory.
Fuck off, yeah.
Do you have a friend called Rory?
Yeah. A client. He's a friend of both of ours. Anyway, what the fuck was I even saying? Vulnerability. Yeah. There we go. Have you found, like, since you've shared a lot of your own stories and I guess maybe even like your own struggles around that it's improved now? Or do you still feel like, once you've shared the book and through the podcast and whatnot, do you feel like you're still maybe not in the same areas, but do you still catch yourself in the same habits as what you did previously?
It's funny. It depends. Some days I'm great with it. Some days I'm like, some of the stories, because I was just trying to write like a great book. So I'm like, what's the best stories I've got? And then put them all down. And I was like, I'm happy with them. And then Penguin said quite a few times, are you 100% sure you want to share this stuff? It's pretty vulnerable. I was like, it's fine. Right, it's a great story. People love this. And funnily enough, I didn't question it. But the day it came out, I sat up in bed in the morning. I was like, oh, fuck. People are going to be reading this shit. Like, everyone's going to read this and know this about it. It
sounded good at the time.
Yeah, it was good when I was trying to but then I really panicked for a little while. But then feedback started to come back. The things I was really worried about, people started to say, write me messages, or I'd bump into people on the street and I'd go, that thing you said about your sister, I've been there, mate. And that connection with people who go, I've been down, I've had the exact same thing happen. You just feel safe because no one goes, I can't believe you fucking wrote that. What were you telling me that for? I don't want to hear about that. It's the opposite. Everyone was like, thanks for sharing that. I needed to hear that because but some days I wake up and go, oh God, I've put so much out in the world. But then other days I'm like, no, good. I'm happy with that. I'm comfortable. So some days vulnerability really, to me, and I wrote in the book, it's taking an emotional risk, basically. It's a really hard thing to do, especially for us males, because it's a bit counterintuitive. Like, we want to we've got everything sorted, we're strong, we're tough, but we're not a lot of the time. And the more we pretend we're not, the more we struggle.
It's funny you say that about, like, people aren't going to read it and then just be questioning as to why the fuck you would share that type of stuff. Like, I used to, I think, a similar thing around like public speaking or even like podcasting and talking on camera and stuff like that. Like, when I first started doing it, like, especially around the health and fitness space, I'd be talking about something that I knew like the back of my hand in front of a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I would get really nervous around it, even just taking big training sessions in front of a lot of people and whatnot. But then what I started thinking about is how, like, all the times I've watched people talk, people like yourself or whoever, at any point in time, whenever I watch someone speak publicly, even if they were fucking horrendous, I have never thought about it again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I've never left there and gone, fuck, I went to this thing today. You should have seen how shit this guy was at talking and how weird his voice sounded and all this stuff. Like, because I would always think about that. I'd be like, even now, like, I'd never listen back to any of the episodes because I just don't like listening to my own voice. But it's not because I'm ashamed of it or anything. I just don't like it. But when I first got into it, it was all around that. It was like, geez, what are they going to be thinking about? What are they going to be thinking of me, like, while I'm talking? But then once I had that thought around the fact that I've never thought that when I've watched anyone else, it's just completely gone now.
Yeah,
and
that's
I think
huge.
it just made such a difference.
But then, I mean, you love doing this, don't you? Like,
I do really enjoy it, but if I may not have ever even given myself a chance to figure that out.
Well, that's it. Like, it was a very vulnerable thing to do it in the first place. Like, extremely vulnerable to go, well, I feel anxious about people hearing me speak, but I'm going to do it anyway, have a crack at it. And then, and then it leads to connection. Like, ultimately, and the connections you've made with people, the reach of podcasts, it still blows my mind, like, how many people...
Oh, it's crazy. I spoke with it's absolutely insane. I'm not saying this because I'm trying to blow my own horn or whatever the saying is. I fuck up every saying that I try and come up with. But this show is now about to pass like 3 million downloads.
Wow.
Which is over a long period of time and stuff. But like, to me, I said this to my partner Danielle the other day. It's just like mind blowing to think that, like, on the show this morning with Byron, we had a chat earlier today, and I was talking about how, like, when I first started recording them, I would literally have my phone and I'd have the whole episode written in my notes. And I'd be reading it, trying not to sound like I'm reading it, but at the same time, I was also a fucking shit reader, so it was quite obvious that I was reading it out of my notes. Whereas now, it's like I was saying to Jaden before we hit record today, it's like I don't like, unless it's someone that I'm not too familiar with. Like even when I record by myself, I'll just hit record with pretty much absolutely no idea what I'm about to say. And it just feels comfortable, but it really does only come with practice. But also at the same time, like if I had have continued to, beat myself up about this little thing that no one else was thinking, it was just myself, would never have even got to this point. And, met people like yourself, and the connections and stuff like that you get to make, as you mentioned, is just insane. Yeah,
it's just a great. I mean, you think about how many 3 million is. Like that's, I don't know, like 30 MCGs lined up.
It's crazy.
It's. Is that right? Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, my maths.
Don't ask me about maths, mate. I can count reps. That's why no sets will go past 15. If anyone wants to come and do PT, you won't have to do any more than 15 reps.
15, some more. Yeah, it's a but that's what, like, you're vulnerable, and then the reward is enormous.
Yeah. In terms of, all right, you'll love this. So let's talk about training for a little bit, because I know you absolutely love it. Like, how much do you think that it helps? Obviously, you talked about flow state before with your running and stuff, but when you are firing on all cylinders with your running and doing your resistance training and whatnot, and you're eating well, like, how much of an impact do you think that has on your speaking and your productivity with podcasting and content and all that type of stuff? Yeah. Do you actually? I know it's not cliche because it's true, I guess, but a lot of people say it. But do you actually find that it does help a lot?
It is. I mean, for me, it's. I'm kind of pretending that I'm like this elite 400-meter runner just because I have a bit more time.
Well, the times you're running at, ridiculous.
They're okay. Yeah. I mean, I always compare myself, I said before, the 20, 21-year-olds who are running 47 and a half seconds. Like, they're 46 and a half. Like, that's how I compare myself, which is stupid. But I need to stop doing that. But so just to give an example of how, like, to really answer your question. So all of a sudden, when Australia opened up end of last year, we were able to do 8 shows, I think it was. We went...
we came to one night, actually.
Oh, did you? Oh, the one in Melbourne?
We were sitting on the couch. No. Yeah, we were sitting on the couch. We were just about to eat dinner, and Danielle goes, I'm pretty sure Hugh's talking tonight. So we just got an Uber there and came in. Good. Yeah, it was great. At the convention centre, yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
I love that one. That was a good... Yeah, it was really enjoyed that one. So I did 8 of them, and it was Adelaide, Sydney... No, was it Sydney? Adelaide, Canberra, Sydney... where else did we go? Anyway, I can't remember what it was. We got to quite a few venues, and I just said to the people who book everything, I said, just like, we need to get into the city by 10 in the morning, and we need to be staying within a 10-minute jog to an ath track. Basically, that's my thing, because I would go and do a session, and it would be like 2.5 hours, and I'd eat really healthily and drink lots of water, have like a half an hour nap, and just do everything. And there was a direct correlation with how good my running sessions were, or how I felt physically, with how well I spoke.
Yeah.
And it's not a placebo. Like, it's
legit, yeah.
It's absolutely. Like, and I'd often say, can we fly out the night before, because I want to have a really good sleep, because I don't get that at home with kids.
Yeah.
And then I'll train, and then I'll eat well, and then so it's huge. Like, I would directly plan the sessions, the training sessions I wanted to do. So it's something about speed sessions that knock me about a bit too much. I think it's like, you'd be able to explain this, but
central nervous system and all the depleting all your glycogen and stuff. Yeah,
cooked. Like, it's funny because the session will be. When I started doing this, I was like, well, I'm speaking tonight, and it's a big one. It's a big audience, so I've got to be on. So I won't do as much distance. I'll do a speed session, and I think it was 4 60s and 2 120s. Yeah, that was it. That's all I was doing. And I was in the green room beforehand, couldn't stop yawning. Yeah. I was like, what is going on? And then
oxygen deficit. So you would often have this in the sessions that you do, but whenever you do any type of like lactate threshold or anaerobic session, say for example, I got you in the gym now and got you on the assault bike and said, I want you to do a max effort of 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Often you'll find in the minutes afterwards, you just can't stop yawning. It's because your body isn't able to provide enough oxygen. So that's why it makes you yawn, yeah.
Okay, well that's so...
And you block your ears and all that type. Your ears get blocked and stuff, yeah.
Okay, so that answers that because I was cooked after that and I was so sleepy. But then the next time I was in Adelaide and I did, I did 5 300s with about a 5-6 minute rest between them.
Yeah.
And which is a much harder session, I thought, but I felt amazing.
Interesting.
Amazing. So yeah, it's about getting the sessions right, but I'm really obsessed with it, and I almost sort of trick myself. It's this weird thing. Maybe it's an insecurity. I don't know, but I almost trick myself that I'm going to Adelaide to train. And I've got to do a talk afterwards.
Yeah.
So if the talk doesn't go as well, I go, well, I wasn't there for that. I don't put as much pressure on the talk. I'm I'm there to run. That's what I'm there to do. So I just love it so much, and I'm just disappointed at myself for not being obsessed when I was a bit younger. When I had. In my 20s, I had so much time and I had to where I could have really got into this.
Yeah.
And I've never been more motivated than I'm right now. But then, this morning when I got on the watt bike at 6, I was like, I've got an hour but the kids came downstairs at 6:25, 6:30, and then now I'm making breakfast for them and getting ready for the day. I'm like, well, I've got half an hour and I thought I had an hour. And then I'd love to, on the way home, go and just do something, but I got to get home and help with dinner. So I wish in my 20s I'd been this motivated because
motivated, yeah. But
So,
it's awesome that you're pursuing it now, though, I think.
Yeah, it's cool. I certainly feel I don't know, proud's the right word, but even when I got my ass kicked the other day at Lakeside Stadium against all the 20-year-olds, there's a video on YouTube of it, and I when they show the finish, I'm not even in the picture. I'm not in it. You can see everyone else running, and I'm not in it. But the race finished, and I was just sitting there, and I was, as you are after 400, disgusting feeling for a couple of minutes afterwards. But I was like, I feel quite proud of myself that I'm putting myself out, because this is vulnerable to me, running against people who are a lot quicker than me and trying to keep up. And I probably look pretty slow next to these guys, but I do feel quite proud at age 41 that I am doing this. I do, yeah.
This is way off topic. Do you watch much stand-up comedy? I know you talked about comedy at the start. Yeah,
so obsessed.
Who's your top 5?
Billy Connolly's my number 1 of all time.
Yep.
Because you watch him, he doesn't tell jokes, he doesn't write jokes, he tells stories. They're always stories. I was listening to him in the car on the way out here, actually, just through. I obsessed. He'd be number 1 by a mile. Ricky Gervais is probably number 2.
Yep.
Have you got a top 5 as well?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Ricky Gervais number 2. It's very unfashionable to say my number 3, and I think he's been cancelled, but I'm talking about him as a stand-up comedian, not as a person. Louis C.K.
Okay, yeah. I thought you were going to say Bill Cosby there for a second. I was going to say, fuck, mate, super vulnerable today.
Cut this guy. No, it's purely as the genius of stand-up, Louis C.K.
Yeah.
In fact, no. I'm going to make him 5th, just to
Okay.
He's lost a few points for the stuff he's done as a person, so he's 5th. Aziz Ansari, his stand-up special on Netflix.
Yep.
Fucking unbelievable.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
No, I haven't. I'll have to start it.
It's just so good. So, him number 3. Australian, there's an Australian in there. Maybe Becky Lucas.
Okay.
I love Becky Lucas.
Yep.
Very, very funny. Unique sort of style. Brilliant. And then, we'll go last. 5th is Louis.
Nice.
How about you?
So I'm obsessed with stand-up comedy. I love it. Prior to COVID, I was heading over to LA for a month or 2, pretty much every winter. And I would literally go by myself, weeknights. I'd buy a ticket to the comedy store. I'd go there, sit there for 3 hours by myself and just watch stand-up comedy. I fucking love it, right? Anyway,
so good.
So my top 5, and one of these guys, I'm going to send you some links because he is the definition of storytelling comedy. It's a most hilarious thing ever. Top 5 would have to be number 1 at the moment, Theo Vaughn. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. So he's the guy that you need to start saying. I just think you will just froth his stuff. It's just unbelievable. He comes from Louisiana, so he's got this pretty thick Louisiana accent. His dad was 70 when he was born.
Oh my God.
So there's absolute comedy gold already. And he just tells stories from his childhood and stuff. And half the time I don't even know if he thinks it's funny, but the way he says it and the way he pronounces certain words and stuff is just next level. Anyway, awesome. He's unbelievable. Yep. Another one which would probably in the category of Louis C.K., I guess, maybe not as bad, but Chris D'Elia.
Oh, yes.
He's absolutely one of the funniest people on the planet, I think. Who else? I think... who else is really good? I mean, Jim Jeffries. He's pretty piss funny, I think. His
thing on firearms is in America is one of the funniest things and cleverest things I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? I mean, Kevin Hart, you can't really go past him. I think he's pretty funny, or very funny. Who else?
I was watching him on YouTube the other day, and like the skill of what he does is out of this world,
isn't it? It's who would have to be the fifth one? Theo. I don't know, maybe Bobby Lee. Have you heard of Bobby Lee?
You've given me like 4 names here that I
Mate, you'll be set.
Just
now
send me a
for
text
a while.
message later so I can remember them, please.
I absolutely love stand-up comedy, so I just thought I'd throw that in there just for the fucking sake of it, I guess. Mate, before we wrap it up, where do you see, what's your kind of goals for, I guess, over the coming year? I know it's a pretty cliche question and whatnot in the business. Obviously want to grow the business and whatnot, but is there anything specific and maybe different than what it has been over the previous years that you really want to focus on?
I want to run 400 metres under 50 seconds.
Unreal.
That's just to go before it's my priority. I want to do that. That's a massive one for me. Getting closer, but a bit of work to do. But as far as work's concerned, we are... the podcast, we've really decided with Ryan Shelton, Josh, my brother, and I have decided that we just get so much joy from this doing the podcast that we would like to invest more time and money into it.
Yeah,
we're not quite the professional outfit that you are yet. We're kind of, we're going to need to get an episode out in a couple of weeks. We're going to film, we're going to do something now, and then it's like,
mate.
Okay, well, you're doing a good job looking like you professional. But so we've put aside a day a week this year where Wednesdays are our podcast day, and we're going to try and get batch recordings done. So
cool. And
then Ryan's going to build a lot of content around the episodes, and so we've now got a producer, and we've got a social media person, and we've got someone to cut the videos. So we're going to, which I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah.
When I learned so much off Ryan Shelton, I can't even begin to tell you. I talk about comedians. I mean, he's not a stand-up comedian, but no one makes me laugh like Ryan Shelton does.
Yeah.
And to be able to work with him, I had 2 meetings with him this morning, and he's done 15, 20 years with Hamish and Andy of creating their products with them. I just learned so much about creativity, professionalism, hard work, all that kind of stuff, and thoroughness. And I mean, for a show called The Imperfects, it's extraordinary how much work we put into making every episode as perfect as possible. Yeah. But I look forward to that. And in the school programs, I think we've got, it's 400,000 kids around the country doing our curriculum every day. And that, to me, I'm not as involved on the ground delivering those sessions to kids, but I still, I met with the education team today, and I mean, that'll always be our bread and butter at the Resilience Project is school programs. So still very, very inspired by the work our team's doing there. And that's just to reach as many kids as possible, I think. It's a very long answer to your question, but I think to continue to reach as many kids, because, the world's become a very difficult, complicated, and at times it feels quite hopeless place. So trying to give kids strategies to deal with this shit that's going on at the moment is pretty important.
Fantastic. Hugh, I really do appreciate you coming on the show again today, mate. It's always a pleasure to have a chat with you, and we'll have to get some training sessions in and maybe watch a bit of stand-up comedy sometime soon. But
we could do that as like a date. Just like
mandate, for sure. We'll train, go for a run,
stand-up
podcast, and watch stand-up comedy. Yeah, fantastic.
No, I'm such a massive fan of what you do, and the content you put out is amazing, and it helps so many people. So it's great to be on here. So
appreciate it, mate. Thanks a lot. And for everyone who is listening, if you haven't already read Hugh's new book, I'll have the link to all that in the show notes, and obviously the Resilience Project. If you haven't read that, then what the hell are you doing? So make sure you get that done. But again, appreciate everyone who's tuned in, and thanks again, Hugh, and look forward to chatting to you again soon, mate.
Thank you, mate. Chat soon.